Hello, guys. My name is Millicent. I'm a student at the University of Venda studying BSc in Hydrology and Water Resources, and I'll be giving you a core talk under the topic Plate Tectonics, where we'll be discovering the world's biggest jigsaw puzzle, so stay tuned. Plate tectonic is one of the natural driving force of climate change, and the first one is the Millicent cycle, which we actually learned about on our previous talk, which was Paleoclimate. Looking at the past climate graph, I was able to see that our y-axis is represented by temperature in degrees Celsius, while our x-axis is represented by millions of years ago, meaning that it is represented by time. From the graph, I was able to see that from 3 million years ago to the present time, temperature were warmer. A question was posed on our previous talk, which state how or what caused the temperature to increase from 3 million years ago to 60 million years ago. So, my listener, that's exactly what we are about to find out. In the beginning, we learned that our model predicted that temperature were cold, and we added greenhouse effect and we found out that temperature were actually hot, meaning that it was hot in such a way that it was not habitable for life to exist. Finally, we found out that the ocean and the atmosphere distributed excess heat and caused the planet at exactly the right temperature for life. In this section, we learned that the Earth is constantly changing, so are the temperature. Temperature for life cannot be one temperature as we thought. Now let's go and find out about one factor which makes continual changes, and that factor is plate tectonics. And plate tectonics is found on the 4th level of the story of the Earth on the hurricane of models. On our presentation outline, we'll be looking at the structure of the Earth, where we will be discussing the types of layer which makes up the structure of the Earth. And we'll also look at plate tectonics, what are plate tectonics, and also the types of boundary which are found on plate tectonics. And also, what are the effects that plate tectonics has on climate change? And most importantly, how does plate tectonics influence the habitability of the planet Earth? And also, how is our beautiful South Africa special with regard to our talk, which is plate tectonics? On the structure of the Earth, we'll be looking at the 5 layers which makes up the structure. We have the crust, the upper mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. The inner core is a huge metal ball which is made up of iron and nickel. This core is about 2.5 kilometer wide, and the temperature at the inner core is approximately 5 to 6,000 degrees Celsius. That's actually 21 hotter than our atmosphere. The metal at the inner core stays solid. Why? I think it's obvious, because the temperature are actually higher and it's actually hotter. The metal at the inner core, they stay solid because of the pressure surrounding that core. We also have the outer core, which is a layer that flows around the center, which flows around the center of the Earth. And also, the movement of the metal at the outer core create a magnetic field rays which protect us from the sun's radiation. We also have the mantle and the upper mantle. Technically, we are saying that as we go down, it gets hot. Just like I've mentioned in the inner core, that the temperature are approximately 5 to 6,000 degrees Celsius, meaning that it is hot. Therefore, when we are comparing the mantle and the upper mantle, it means that the upper mantle cannot be softer than the mantle itself. It means that the mantle is softer while the upper mantle is harder. Lastly, on the type of layers which makes up the structure of the Earth, we have the crust. The crust is where we live in. It's where I am now. It's where you are. That's the crust. The crust is also mainly made up of two components, where we have the continental crust. We also have the oceanic crust. I will try to distinguish them so that you'll be able to understand the difference between them and also how they connect. The continental crust is thick while the oceanic crust is thin. The continental crust is less denser than the oceanic crust, meaning that the oceanic crust can be able to sink beneath the continental crust because of its high density. And also, the crust is also the outermost solid part of the earth. And all land masses are like mountains and plains are contained within it, along with ocean, sea, lakes, and rivers. And most importantly, it supports life. My dear listeners, we have been talking about the structure of the earth, the beginning, the climate, the past climate graph, and our topic is plate tectonics. But yes, we still don't know what is plate tectonics. I was able to find that this scientific definition which defines plate tectonic, and this is how it goes. Plate tectonics is the theory that the Earth's outer shell, which is the crust, as I have mentioned, is the outermost part, the outermost solid part of the Earth, is divided into several plates. If you could look at the world's map, you may notice that some of the continents could fit together like a pieces of puzzle. Is it possible for continent to fit together like a piece of puzzle? I mean, like pizza, if we can make an example. Pizza, when they cut it, into pieces, it's a puzzle, right? Yes. Is it possible? I think we're gonna find out. As we all know, if there is a theory, it means that there is someone who came up with that theory. We basically came across this guy called Alfred Wegener. Alfred Wegener argued that at one point there was a supercontinental mass which was called Pangaea. He basically theorized that this supercontinent, which was called Pangaea, around 135 million years ago, the continent started to actually split it into two big continental masses, which was Laurasia and Gondwanaland. After Laurasia and Gondwanaland was formed, they didn't stop there. They continued to split into different continents that we now see. As you can see, from 65 million years ago, we have different continents, and now in the present there are so many different continents that we can mention. We have American plates, yes, and so on. Not everyone actually believed Alfred Wegener's theory, since he didn't really have enough evidence to support his theory other than his observation. Many scientists believe that it was due to Earth's temperature that made the continent to move. But either way, legal evidence were gathered, and this was also noticed by some of the paleoclimatologists when they found fossils of the same species in different continents. How is that possible? How is that possible that they can find fossils of the same species in different continents? My dear listeners, I think it's possible for them to find fossils of the same species in different continents. Remember that all this continent actually came from one super single continental mass, which was Pangaea. Pangaea started as one, and then it split into two, Laurasia and Gondwanaland, meaning that fossils from from Pangaea were splitted between Laurasia and Gonaland, and it didn't end there. When Laurasia and Gonaland started to split again, it means that all those fossils were scattered in all those continents which were formed. And also they also noticed that rock structure with similar features in different continents. It was also possible because all these rocks with features, they were also from one supercontinental mass, which was Pangaea, and also they were all scattered to different continents when they split. As I mentioned on our presentation outline, that we're also gonna look at the types of boundaries that we have. We have the convergent boundaries, we also have the divergent boundaries, and we have the transform boundaries. And we will go through each one of them, and you may see how they actually differ. Convergent boundary, this is where plates are actually moving towards each other. They're actually moving towards each other. And if one plate, such as oceanic plates, is moving towards continental plates, as I have mentioned when I was explaining what the crust is, I mentioned that the continental crust is less denser than the oceanic crust, meaning that the oceanic crust can be able to sink beneath the continental crust because of its high density. And just like they are explaining it on the convergent boundary, it says that the oceanic plate sinks because of high density. Because of high density. The temperature also increasingly becomes of friction between the two plates. Melting magma rises up into the overlaying continental crust and form volcanic eruption. We also have a divergent boundary. This is where plates are actually moving away from each other. And as I've mentioned on our previous slides, when we were discussing about the convergent boundary, I said plates are actually moving towards each other. Now on the divergent boundary, plates are actually moving away from each other. The plates can either be continental crust, the plates can either be continental plate or oceanic plates. And as plates pull apart, hot molten material, which is magma, rises up into the surface and causes volcanic eruption. When the divergent boundary is on the ocean floor, a mid-oceanic ridge is formed. By a mid-oceanic ridge, I mean the earth feature. It's actually formed on the ocean floor. And when the divergent boundary is on the continental, it forms a continental rift or a rift. And also, as plates move apart, new material is erupted to fill in the gaps. Lastly, on the types of boundary, we have the transform boundary. This is where the plates are actually sliding past each other. As I've mentioned, the convergent boundary is where plates are actually moving closer to each other, and also the divergent boundary is where plates are moving away from each other. And now on the transform boundary is where plates are actually moving past each other. And we can make an example with the view of sand and is transformed. Now, how does plate tectonics have an effect on the climate? What are the effects of plate tectonics on climate change? As I've mentioned on our second slide, that plate tectonic is one of the driving force of climate change. Now, you all must be wondering, How does plate tectonics causes climate change? Well, firstly, we know that plate tectonic is the movement of the crust, meaning that it moves away, apart, and together, which means that land masses are also moving, and this is known as the disfiguration of continent. And also, plate tectonics alters ocean currents, and therefore heat transport, because again land masses are moving, which means that ocean, for example, can be restricted. And also changes in atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide. As I've mentioned on when I was explaining the convergent boundary and also the divergent boundary, I mentioned that plate tectonics causes volcanic eruption, and when the volcano has erupted and it has scattered in the atmosphere, it forms greenhouse gases where we're gonna have carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and so forth. And again, my dear friend, how does plate tectonics influence the habitability of the planet Earth? Basically, land distribution. The fact that, for example, the albedo is changing, the climate is also changing, the land masses are being distributed. The way the land masses are being distributed, the way it is, it causes the climate condition to be favorable for us, to be favorable for life to happen, and also for the planet to be habitable. As I've mentioned on our second slides, I mentioned that from the graph, temperature were warmer from 3 million years ago to the present time, and it has been theorized to have been caused by the Milankovitch cycle. And also, a question was posed by the previous lecture, which says how or what caused the temperature to increase from 3 million years ago to 60 million years ago. Basically, plate tectonics, the temperature has been theorized. It has been theorized to have been caused by plate tectonics. That's why the temperature were actually higher from 3 million years ago to 60 million years ago. Now, my dear friends, as I mentioned on our presentation outline, now, how is our beautiful South Africa special with regard to our talk? South Africa is actually located on the African plate, which is one of the 8 major plates that we have. Not only is located on the African plate, it is also located on the central region of the African plate. Therefore, we can conclude that South Africa is relatively stable compared to other places. However, the biggest earthquake which was recorded in South Africa was in Ceres in Eastern Cape. It was recorded in 1969. The earthquake was measured to be 6.3 on the Richter scale, and it was felt across the country. Now, that's all I actually have for you. Thank you.